We are diving immediately into, well, what you could call the deepest point of crisis,
Uh-huh.
a moment where a fledgling state and really an entire faith, the newly formed Islamic community, or Ummah,
Right.
stood on the absolute precipice of collapse.
That is, I think, the perfect way to frame this.
Yeah,
We are focusing on the immediate aftermath of the passing of the prophet,
right.
a period that, historians almost universally agree was the single greatest internal crisis faced by early Islam.
And our sources today, they're really focused on extracting the core leadership lessons from one man.
Yes,
And
from Abu Bakr as Siddiq.
it sounds like a situation where the entire foundation was just rocking. The
Yeah.
stakes were truly existential.
Completely.
And if we're going to understand how Islam stabilized and then eventually thrived, we have to look right at this moment.
Absolutely. Our deep dive today is really defined by 4 pillars of leadership that saved the Ummah.
Okay.
We see them repeated across the historical accounts. It was defined by unwavering courage, absolute moral and theological clarity, a deep practical trust in God, and finally just unmatched decisiveness in his leadership.
And the chaos they were up against wasn't just some manageable unrest.
Not at all.
Our sources detail what sounds like a perfect storm of failure that hit all at once.
Indeed. We're talking about comprehensive threats. You have the rise of multiple false prophets attacking the ideological core.
Wow.
Then you have the mass military and political rebellions, which we know as the Ridda Wars.
Right.
The refusal to pay the essential mandatory charity, Zakat, which, that undermined the entire state structure.
The whole thing.
And finally, the ultimate catastrophe, they narrowly avoided the loss of the preserved scripture itself.
So our mission today is really to unpack how Abu Bakr transformed this terrifying landscape into a consolidated state.
Yes, and focusing intensely on the decisions, the conviction that led to the preservation of the Qur'an.
And for you, the listener, understanding this period it's critical. It provides a kind of blueprint for how to defend core foundational principles.
Exactly. When you're facing overwhelming internal and external pressure. Let's begin by setting the scene. When the prophet passed away, it wasn't just the death of a revered leader.
It was more than that.
It was the cessation of divine revelation. The sources really emphasize the emotional shock, the political vacuum.
And just this profound atmosphere of fear.
A deep fear. For many companions, the central pillar of their existence had just vanished.
I can't even imagine.
And the entire Arabian Peninsula, which had only just recently unified under Islam, it began shaking. Violently.
I imagine that sudden loss immediately unleashed all those, latent political and tribal tensions.
Of course.
The ones that the prophet's presence and charisma had previously kept in check.
It was like a race backward.
Yeah, trying to revert to old tribal loyalties.
It was worse than a race backward. It was a comprehensive institutional breakdown. Our sources highlight 6 distinct but interconnected threats. 6 threats that coalesced almost immediately, and they were destabilizing the community from every single angle.
So we need to look at them as a unified mechanism of failure.
That's the key.
Okay, so let's break down that mechanism. What's the first threat?
Well, first, there was simple apostasy. Many tribes, they saw the covenant with Medina as being with the prophet personally.
So when he was gone,
the deal was off. They just renounced Islam entirely and reverted to their ancestral idols or practices.
Okay, that's one. What's the second?
Second, and this was maybe more dangerous, was the ideological threat.
The false prophets.
Exactly. The rise of charismatic individuals who claimed prophethood, diverting spiritual allegiance away from the true message.
And establishing their own rival religious and, I guess, political centers.
Precisely. So you had people leaving the faith entirely, and then others trying to hijack it and redefine it from within.
And then the problem moves from the spiritual realm into the state's actual functional integrity.
Yes, exactly. The third threat was the refusal to pay Zakat. And this is so vital to understand.
Explain that.
Zakat is the mandatory charity. It's one of the 5 pillars. It wasn't just a state tax,
It was a religious contract.
A religious contract. By refusing it, these groups claimed they were still Muslim. They still performed their prayers, their salah, but they rejected the central authorities' right to collect the levy and manage the collective welfare.
Wait, let's pause right there, because this is where the crisis gets incredibly nuanced and dangerous.
It is.
Why did they draw that specific line at Zakat?
Well, they tried to argue that Zakat was a personal tax owed only to the prophet himself.
I see.
And since he was gone, the obligation expired. It was their their tactical compromise.
So they wanted the benefits of community membership, like the religious identity,
Right.
without the obligations of the shared economic and social contract that actually define the state.
You've hit it exactly.
Yeah.
Which means the fourth threat followed inevitably from that.
Active political rebellion.
Active political rebellion. By refusing zakat, they were actively challenging the governing authority of the caliph in Medina.
It wasn't just passive noncompliance.
No, it was a military assertion of sovereignty.
And that sovereignty was often rooted in the fifth challenge, which you mentioned.
A fierce resurgence of tribal nationalism.
Right.
They prioritized their specific tribal identities, Ghatafan, Hawazin, and so on, over the unifying concept of the Ummah.
So it was the ultimate subversion of Islamic unity.
It was. It proved that for some of these tribes, their conversion had been, let's say, political and superficial.
Not deep-seated and foundational.
Not at all. They were trying to dismantle the unified Islamic structure and replace it with the old, divisive, pre-Islamic tribal structure.
And all this time, the sixth threat is just looming on the horizon.
Looming. The external enemies, like the powerful empires of Byzantium and Persia, waiting on the borders, sensing weakness.
The perfect storm.
That confluence, the internal fragmentation combined with the external vultures, it created a pressure cooker.
And when you look at the advice Abu Bakr was getting,
It was almost universally cautious. Many senior leaders were suggesting, look, let's negotiate.
let's talk to those who still pray but refuse zakat.
Let's manage the ideological threats first. They were looking for pragmatism.
But this is the moment. This is where Abu Bakr's uncompromising clarity just defines history.
He stood like a mountain, as the sources say.
Refusing to accept any form of half-compliance.
It's the pivotal defining moment.
Ah,
And we have to spend some time on his famous declaration.
let's do it.
Because it shows his understanding of the faith as a comprehensive blueprint.
He said, by Allah, I will fight anyone who separates Salah from zakat.
That's the one.
That quote is so incredibly powerful. Let's analyze it from every angle because it's not just a fighting slogan, is it?
Not at all. It reveals a profound theological and governance principle.
What was he saying with that?
Abu Bakr was saying that Islam is an indivisible system. Salah, prayer, represents the vertical relationship with God.
Spiritual commitment.
Exactly. And zakat, the charity, represents the horizontal relationship, the commitment to the community, to social justice.
And the economic structure of the state.
The whole thing.
So if you allow a group to say, we'll pray, but we won't contribute to the common treasury or adhere to the common law.
Then you are essentially accepting a form of private individualistic faith.
Right, one that has no public, governmental, or social obligation.
Precisely. If he had conceded on zakat, he would have effectively turned the Ummah into a loose federation of tribes who owed nothing to the central authority beyond a spiritual nod.
He knew that if you remove one pillar,
Just one.
no matter how pragmatic that removal seems politically,
The entire structure eventually collapses. The state cannot exist without an economic engine.
and the faith can't exist if its principles are negotiable based on, tribal convenience.
He was not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
It was a decision rooted in theological conviction that had massive practical consequences.
By holding firm on the indivisibility of Salah and Zakat, he guaranteed the economic and religious infrastructure of the state would remain intact.
And by doing that, he secured its survival against these very real forces of fragmentation. He was fighting for the definition of the state itself.
And that conviction, it just became the bedrock for everything else.
Everything. This small, seemingly administrative or financial point, the enforcement of zakat, is where the entire foundation of centralized Islamic governance was forged.
And had he compromised?
Had he compromised, the Ridda Wars would have been unwinnable because he would have invalidated his own authority to enforce any law outside of Medina.
So, having established the non-negotiability of the state structure through zakat, they then had to confront the spiritual attack.
Yes.
The crisis wasn't merely financial, it was deeply ideological.
And this was perhaps the most insidious threat.
Because it attacked the very core principle of Islam, the finality of the prophecy.
Exactly. If people start believing a new prophet, the whole foundation is just destroyed.
In our sources, they detail three major claimants that Abu Bakr prioritized dealing with.
Yes, three main ones.
Let's look at the variety of these claimants because it really shows the extent of the ideological vacuum that must have existed.
It does. We can start with Talaiha al-Asadi. He was a significant figure described as a powerful warrior.
And an influential leader of the Bani Asad tribe.
So his claim wasn't just a religious one. It immediately translated into a powerful, localized military threat. He commanded large, hardened forces.
which made him a major political player.
A very serious one.
And then there's the unique case of Saja.
Yes, the sources mention Saja, a woman from the Bani Tamim tribe.
She also claimed to receive revelation.
She did. And what's fascinating about her inclusion in the sources is that she briefly allied herself with Musaylama.
The other false prophet.
Right. It shows the sheer desperation and fluidity of the political landscape. These ideological rivals were sometimes willing to form pragmatic alliances against Medina.
So her emergence really demonstrated how widespread the thirst for new spiritual guidance was.
It showed the internal confusion following the prophet's passing.
But the sources are absolutely clear that the true existential threat
The deadliest threat.
was Musaylama al-Khattab, or the liar.
Musaylama was, he was the grand strategist of ideological deception. He didn't just claim prophethood.
No, he established a counter-state in Yemen.
A full-on counter-state. He mimicked many elements of Islam, inventing his own set of prayers and laws.
Sometimes trying to make them easier than Islamic law, right? To attract followers.
Exactly. And it worked. He had gathered a massive army numbering in the tens of thousands.
And effectively declared himself the rival prophet of a powerful rival state.
A state which was a direct challenge to Medina.
And this is where the tension becomes palpable. The companions, they just endured this profound grief of loss.
And they were facing threats from every direction.
So they were naturally cautious about engaging Musaylama, given his military strength and how far away he was.
They absolutely argued for caution. The pragmatic approach would have been, let's leave Musaylama alone for a year.
Right. Consolidate power closer to home and maybe let internal dynamics weaken him.
But Abu Bakr refused. He understood that ideology travels much faster than an army.
He cut through the military calculation with that same moral clarity we saw with the Zakat debate.
And his declaration here is the second critical principle that guided the entire war effort.
What did he say?
He said, truth and falsehood can never exist together.
It's so simple, but so powerful.
And this wasn't just piety, it was strategic. It meant there could be no acceptance of dual centers of divine authority.
So if Medina allowed Musaylama to exist, even peacefully,
the core message of Islam, that Prophet Muhammad was the final prophet, would be implicitly undermined forever.
So the strategy was dictated by an absolute theological declaration.
Yes.
It wasn't about who was easier to defeat. It was about who was the greatest threat to the theological integrity of the Ummah.
Exactly. Abu Bakr knew that falsehood is like an ideological cancer. If you leave it to metastasize,
it will eventually destroy the host.
Right. And this conviction provided the necessary moral mandate to prepare the massive military campaign against Yamama immediately.
Overriding the fear and caution of his companions?
He had to defend the spiritual boundary before he could even think about defending the physical one.
So the military campaigns that followed this moral mandate were the Ridda Wars, the wars of apostasy.
Yeah.
And our sources really emphasize the sheer geographical scope of this conflict. This wasn't a quick police action.
Oh, not at all. This was a war for the future of Arabia, fought simultaneously across the entire peninsula.
The scale was just astonishing.
Imagine trying to fight a civil war across a massive desert terrain with limited communication against tribes who knew the land intimately.
And the state faced threats in, what were the regions?
In Bahrain, Oman, Najd, Yemen, and, of course, the pivotal challenge in Yama. The map was essentially divided.
Between the loyalists centered in Medina and this massive, interconnected network of rebelling tribes all across Central Arabia.
It was a monumental task.
And crucially, this effort required expert military command, who was tasked with leading this massive multi-front response.
Well, this is where Abu Bakr demonstrated immediate strategic genius in his delegation of authority. He chose his commanders very carefully.
Most famously, Khalid ibn al-Walid.
Yes, Khalid, known as the Sword of Allah. He was tasked to lead the most critical campaigns, particularly against Tulayha and then eventually Musaylama.
And his brilliance in desert warfare and rapid movement?
It allowed Medina to tackle multiple threats almost simultaneously. It was key.
Ensuring that the fragmented rebels couldn't consolidate their forces.
Exactly.
The narrative suggests that even as these commanders were deployed, the debate back in Medina about strategy was still going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Surely when the reports of the scope of the rebellion came back, many leaders urged him to pull back or negotiate.
They absolutely did. Seeing the sheer numbers involved, especially the forces Musaylama had amassed, many continued to suggest a cautious approach.
We should wait. The rebels are too many.
Let's focus on those who are actively fighting, not those who are merely refusing Zakat. This was the practical, risk-averse choice for any leader inheriting a fragile state.
But Abu Bakr refused, once again, prioritizing principle over political expediency.
He did.
And this brings us back to what I find to be the most compelling and definitive statement about his character as a leader.
The one that crushed all arguments for caution.
Right. He said, "If they stop giving even one rope they used to give during the life of the prophet, I will fight them."
That's the one.
We talked about the principle behind Zakat earlier, but let's talk about the one rope specifically.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate detail of non-compromise. Why risk everything, the lives of his companions, the stability of the state, over what sounds like a single piece of equipment?
Because the rope, or maybe the rope used to tether a camel for zakat collection, it's entirely symbolic.
It's not about the rope itself.
The battles wasn't for the value of the rope, it was for the integrity of the covenant. The collection of that rope, or that animal, was the physical, observable act of maintaining the religious, political, and economic contract established by the prophet.
So, refusal of the rope wasn't just economic negligence. It was a unilateral revocation of allegiance.
Precisely. Abu Bakr understood something absolutely fundamental about governing.
Which was?
If you allow a break in the contract, no matter how small the item in question, you have effectively opened the door for those tribes to challenge every other law based on their own self-interest.
He recognized that integrity is absolute. It can't be partially enforced.
A small compromise on principle today means total systemic collapse tomorrow.
This decision really cemented the idea that the new Islamic State demanded comprehensive adherence to its foundational laws.
It wasn't an optional membership club.
It was a commitment to a unified legal and religious system.
And this is why his conviction saved Islam. He refused to allow the definition of Islam to be reduced to mere belief without a corresponding social and financial obligation.
He was fighting for the enforcement of a functional, unified religious system.
And demonstrating that the authority of Medina was not subject to tribal negotiation. That firmness was the genesis of unity.
It's such a powerful lesson in governance. Sometimes the most rigid adherence to a seemingly small detail of a contract is the only way to preserve the entire system.
So the critical showdown that really dictated the future of the faith was the Battle of Yama.
The engagement with Musaylama's massive forces.
It was the culmination of all the ideological and military challenges.
Our sources truly emphasize the intensity here. They sometimes call the area the Garden of Death because of how brutal the fighting was.
Yes.
What do we know about the forces involved and the sheer human cost?
The battle was a meat grinder. Musaylama's forces fought with a fanatical intensity they believed in his false prophecy.
So they were highly motivated.
Very.
Yeah.
The sources confirmed that the Muslim forces, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, had to fight the hardest battle they had yet encountered.
But the victory was decisive.
It was. It destroyed Musaylama and his movement entirely, but the toll was tremendous. We are talking thousands of Muslims martyred.
And it is the specific composition of those casualties that shifted the historical trajectory entirely. What was the detail that caused such immediate and great fear back in Medina?
The immediate fear wasn't about the total number of soldiers, it was about the number of the Qur'an who fell.
And for those who might be unfamiliar, who exactly were the Qur'an? Why was their human memory the only safeguard for the entire revelation at that time?
The Qur'an were the primary memorizers of the Qur'an. In the Prophet's time, the preferred method of preservation was through oral tradition, memorization.
Combined with some scattered, written fragments.
Scattered fragments on various materials, yes. The Prophet had appointed scribes to write it down, but it was never compiled into one single volume during his life.
Therefore, the living memory of the Qur'an was, quite literally, the complete, verified text.
It was the repository of the revelation.
So when hundreds, even thousands of them were martyred at Yamama, the realization hit Medina with terrifying clarity.
The core of the faith was under threat.
If another such battle occurred, the complete text of the Qur'an could be lost to history. Forever.
Precisely. And this is where the initiative that would save the scripture began. And it was driven by Umar.
Right. The sources describe Umar's urgency. Can you detail his argument to Abu Bakr?
Yes. Umar approached Abu Bakr, and he argued, "So many Qur'an memorizers have been martyred. I fear the Qur'an could be lost. We must take action. Let us compile it into one book."
He recognized that while oral tradition was strong,
Relying solely on it in times of massive military conflict was an unacceptable risk for the perpetuity of the message.
now, this is the profound leadership dilemma, isn't it?
It's huge.
Abu Bakr had just fought a war based on strict adherence to the Prophet's precedent, the Sunnah.
Yes.
Yet Umar was asking him to do something the Prophet had not done. Compile the entire revelation into a single, comprehensive text.
And that is exactly why Abu Bakr's initial reaction was one of sincere, piety-driven hesitation.
He said, how can I do something the Prophet did not do?
The tension here is between adherence to established precedent and responding to a new, unprecedented necessity.
The preservation of the scripture.
Right. To compile it was an innovation, even if it was a necessary one. And Abu Bakr was terrified of adding or subtracting anything from the Prophet's legacy.
I found the sources that detail the back and forth between them just fascinating. It wasn't a quick agreement.
No, it was a serious theological negotiation.
Umar had to persist.
He did. He kept returning to the argument, repeatedly, stressing the greater theological necessity, that the preservation of the message outweighs the procedural hesitation.
So he argued that it was not an innovation in the religion,
but an innovation in the methodology of preservation which served the religion, a crucial distinction.
and the sources confirm that breakthrough moment.
Allah opened Abu Bakr's heart to the truth.
He recognized that his duty as the successor was to ensure the continuity of the message, even if that meant adapting the method of preservation to safeguard against a clear and present danger.
And once he agreed, the sources are clear.
Yeah.
The decision was matched by an absolute commitment to rigor.
He commissioned Zayd ibn Thabit to lead the effort.
Zayd was the ideal choice. He was one of the Prophet's principal scribes and one of the most dedicated memorizers. He bridged both worlds.
Let's detail that methodology, because it is the guarantee of the Qur'an's accuracy. It wasn't just, collecting scraps of paper.
No, it was a scholarly process unparalleled in its time. First, Zayd was tasked with collecting all the written pieces of the Qur'an texts, written on parchments, stones, date palms, whatever they had.
But physical evidence was only step one.
Only step one.
What were the checks on that physical evidence?
So second, they implemented the requirement of two forms of verification. Any piece of written text had to be corroborated by the memorization of the surviving companions.
Those who had heard the recitation directly from the Prophet.
Yes. And third, and this is critical, they demanded witnesses, two reliable individuals who could testify under oath that the written verse had indeed been presented to and approved by the Prophet himself.
That is just immense rigor.
It is.
You've got the written record, human memory, and legal-style testimony all cross-verified.
The entire system was built on cross-verification. They did not rely on any single source. This meticulous, systematic process ensured that the compiled text,
Which was completed and then housed with Abu Bakr.
represented the exact words revealed to the Prophet, removing any possible doubt.
It's incredible. The ultimate outcome is so clear. Without Abu Bakr's political conviction to fight the Ridda Wars, the Qur'an wouldn't have been lost, and the compilation might not have seemed so urgent.
A tragic irony, yes.
But without his subsequent decision to overcome his pious hesitation and initiate the compilation, the text itself might have been lost to future generations.
That single moment fundamentally shaped the destiny of the faith. When we step back, the sheer volume of achievement in Abu Bakr's very brief caliphate, what was it, only a couple of years?
Just a couple of years, it's stunning.
He inherited a near collapse and left behind a consolidated state with its foundational texts secured.
It is a synthesis of multifaceted, immediate success. Our solve is to summarize his achievements.
He saved Islam from collapse by fighting for its political definition.
With Zakat, right?
He preserved its scripture with the Qur'an compilation, he protected its unity against tribalism, and he restored order.
And strengthen the faith globally.
And this legacy hinges entirely on how he led. His clarity was just unmatched.
Think about the immense pressure, senior companions urging negotiation.
The army weakened by the loss of the Prophet, the treasury strained.
Yet, where others saw fear and political expediency, Abu Bakr saw absolute, non-negotiable truth.
He just cut through it all.
That raises a critical point, a challenge we introduced earlier. Wasn't it tactically unwise to prioritize taking down Musaylama first?
Hundreds of miles away in Yamama.
When simpler rebellions were closer to Medina, was this purely a moral decision or was there a military calculation involved?
And that is the essential challenge, isn't it? From a purely military standpoint, fighting close threats first seems logical.
Of course.
But Abu Bakr's decision reveals a strategic prioritization of the intangible over the tangible. Musalama was the symbolic head of the ideological cancer. If he was allowed to stand, his false claim would continue to erode faith everywhere, and it would legitimize every other localized rebellion.
So the military calculation was based on destroying the greatest ideological threat first.
Right.
And by doing that, you strip the smaller rebellions of their claim to legitimacy. The strategy was driven by moral clarity.
Exactly. Leadership, as demonstrated here, is not merely intelligence or political maneuvering. It's courage.
And an unwavering commitment to principle, irrespective of the immediate political cost.
He understood that principle was the foundation. If the foundation is compromised, nothing else matters.
Let's now transition to applying these lessons. What does fighting for one rope or compiling a sacred text teach us about navigating complex modern challenges?
I think the first lesson, which applies to any institution or even personal ethics, is that truth and foundational principle must be protected without compromise. The refusal to compromise on Zakat shows that institutional decay often starts small. If you allow small ethical lapses, small departures from foundational documents,
Or small compromises on core tenets, like that one rope.
the entire system is eventually threatened.
Falsehood, whether it's ideological deception or institutional corruption, it just grows rapidly when people in authority choose caution or silence over clarity.
The second key lesson focuses on governance and social cohesion. Unity requires firmness. Abu Bakr's fight against tribal nationalism was a fight for the structural integrity of the Ummah. Divisions destroy nations, they destroy companies.
And unity isn't always achieved through endless compromise.
No. Sometimes, true unity requires the firm, non-negotiable enforcement of core principles to establish a sustainable, fair framework for everyone.
And central to that firmness, as we saw throughout his entire caliphate, is the third lesson.
Leadership needs moral clarity.
Absolutely.
Abu Bakr did not hesitate because his definition of right and wrong, of necessary versus pragmatic, was absolute.
And in today's world of complex policy debates and information overload,
That ability of a leader to articulate simple, unwavering moral clarity is often the missing ingredient.
it provides direction when everyone else is lost in ambiguity. He didn't ask what was popular, he asked what was right.
And the fourth lesson is perhaps the most sobering, particularly when we talk about the compilation of the Qur'an.
Which is that sacrifice is necessary for preservation.
The definitive text of the faith was not preserved through peaceful administration. It was secured through the blood of the Qur'an at Yama.
And through the immense effort of Zayd ibn Thabit, who spent countless hours verifying every single verse.
Great achievements, especially those involving the defense of foundational principles, almost always require immense sacrifice and courage from those involved. They had to suffer the cost of the war to realize the necessity of the compilation.
And finally, the ultimate macro lesson that just resonates through history.
Decisions shape destiny.
Simple as that.
One leader's conviction, a choice made under overwhelming duress and against the counsel of many of his most respected advisors, saved an entire faith from fragmentation and oblivion.
Had Abu Bakr delayed, had he allowed Zakat to become optional, or had he failed to overcome his piety regarding the compilation?
The historical trajectory would be completely unrecognizable. It just reinforces the profound, terrifying weight of conviction in leadership.
This deep dive has truly revealed why Abu Bakr is rightly and historically remembered as the shield of Islam.
He was the ultimate protector during the ultimate crisis.
No.
He didn't just manage a transition.
No.
He defined the boundaries of the faith and the centralized state during its most fragile moment.
He protected the religion by defeating the ideological threats.
He protected the Qur'an by commissioning its compilation.
He protected the unity of Muslims against tribal decay.
And he protected the legacy of the Prophet by strictly enforcing every single established principle.
His leadership ensured that Islam did not just crawl out of that initial trauma.
No, it emerged consolidated.
Based on an unwavering commitment to principle rather than shaky tribal allegiance.
And that leaves us with provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Based on the principle of the one rope, when you're facing pressure, doubt, or massive popular dissent, what is the source of the conviction that allows a leader to fight for a single, seemingly minor principle, even when everyone else urges compromise and retreat?
And reflect on those non-negotiable principles in your own life, in your business, your family, or your community. What are you willing to fight for?
To the point of risking everything.
Because you know that conceding that one small point means the eventual collapse of the entire structure you are trying to build.
That conviction is often the precise difference between stability and utter collapse.
A truly profound lesson in conviction and leadership. Join us next time for our deep dive into the personal life of Abu Bakr, humility, simplicity, and justice.
We'll examine the personal conduct of the man who saved the Ummah. Until then, stay curious and keep seeking clarity.